drive. You guys ready? This is time. It is an ultimate privilege for me to be able to introduce this next speaker, and there is no better way to pump this convention into high gear than to introduce a man who is a legend of legends. He is an absolute icon. If we had to explain to you and tell you all of this man's accomplishments over his life, it would take a half an hour, and we don't want to take much of his time. However, there are a lot of things that I think you need to be aware of this legend. This man married his high school sweetheart, was married to her for 53 years. They had 2 children together. Like Tim Foley and Jim Dornan, he graduated from Purdue University in 1932. He received as a senior the Big Ten Academic Medal, which means he had the highest grade point average in the whole entire Big Ten. He taught English for 10 years and coached several sports in high school. He served in the military for 3.5 years, came back and then finished teaching high school. He then began his coaching career at Indiana State University. He coached there for 2 years. Then in July of 1948, he began teaching and coaching basketball at UCLA, where he coached for 27 years. And he retired in 1975 there. His accomplishments at UCLA: he captured 10 national championships. The closest coach is to do 4. He captured 19 conference titles. He had an 88-game winning streak, which is 4 undefeated seasons. The closest coach to do so is 1 undefeated season. He was Coach of the Year, an unprecedented 7 times. Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year. He was named as one of the top 50 most influential people in sports history. He is a member of the GTE Academic Hall of Fame. There's only 40 inductees, as Tim Foley was inducted May of 1997. With all of these awards that this man has accomplished, which again, we cannot mention all of these, today he is most proud of some other honors that he has received. He's received the Bellarmine Medal of Excellence. He is the only person in sports history to receive this award. Other notables to receive this award include Mother Teresa. Only person in the Naismith Hall of Fame in more than 1 category, as a player and a coach. He has countless humanitarian awards for his involvement with the youth and community service. However, today this 87-year-old icon's primary occupation is spending time with his 7 grandchildren and 11 great-grandchildren. So please, ladies and gentlemen, get to your feet and let's bring the roof down and show the appreciation in Woods and Foley style. The legend of legends, Coach John Wooden!
It's there in the eyes of the children. Yeah, my face is smiling in the windows. You can come on out, come on up on my door. Wash away the tears of freedom. Now we're here, there's no turning back. We had each other, we have one voice.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm really surprised. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please sit down. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, please. Thank you. Thank you, please. Let's not overdo it. You know, after the day you've had and the entertainment and all the other things, I'm surprised that any of you are still here. And I guess if someone had known that it was me that's going to be up here, you probably wouldn't be, but that's all right, too. I appreciate the introduction, but you know, when it's your chore to introduce someone, you're supposed to say nice things. And it doesn't make any difference whether they're true or not. You don't know the difference. And I think if you, the person being introduced will attempt at least to try to keep things in proper perspective, that no great harm is done. I'll share with you something that has helped me, I think, perhaps keep things in a little better perspective than I might have. When I was discharged from the service in January of 1946, I resumed the teaching position at a high school in South Bend, Indiana, where I had been teaching prior to my enlistment in 1942. And in the spring of 46, I was invited to a neighboring city, Elkhart, to speak at a dinner in which they held annually, in which they honored anyone within the school system that had received any special recognition during that particular school year. And do you know that 25 years later they still recalled that? And I know they did, because it's a custom of some of the daily newspapers in the smaller communities in Indiana to have something in there under the heading of 1 year ago today, 5 years ago today, 10 years ago today, something that someone in the community felt was of some little significance. And under 25 years ago today, in the spring of 1971, this little item appeared. Elkhart school officials announced today that John Wooden, English teacher coach from South Bend Central High School, would be the principal speaker at their recognition dinner, although they had hoped to get a prominent person. That sort of brings you down to earth. You're getting carried away a little bit, almost like some of my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They have that tendency, too. However, it was while teaching at this high school in South Bend, Indiana, that I found myself a little bit disillusioned, somewhat disappointed, I shouldn't say completely surprised, at what parents seemed to expect from the youngsters in my English classes. They expected an A or a B, and if their youngster received less than that, they, in one way or another, oftentimes would try to make the youngster or the teacher feel that they had failed. A C was all right for the neighbor's children, because the neighbor's children are all average, but not for their own. I didn't like that way of measuring. I don't think it's a fair way of measuring. Our good Lord in his infinite wisdom didn't create us equal as far as intelligence is concerned, any more than we equal as far as size or appearance. We're not born in the same environments. We do not all have the same opportunities. And then not everybody can earn an A or a B. Now, do you know in the 1930s, alumni tended to judge athletic teams and coaches of their alma mater the same way that I'll bet most of you do today. If your team wins them all, you consider them reasonably successful. Now, I say that with some validity, because at UCLA we did have a number of years where we won them all. But we didn't win each individual game by the margin that some of our alumni had predicted. And not too infrequently, I felt they had backed up their predictions in a more materialistic sort of way. But that hasn't changed. That was true in the 30s as it is today, and I don't think it's fair. But I wanted to come up with something that I hoped would make me a better teacher and give the youngsters under my supervision something to which to aspire, other than just a higher mark in the classroom or more points in some athletic endeavor. We all want success, and you're successful people, and that's fine, and you should want success. We all should, but what is success? I wonder if we'd all agree. Mr. Webster tells us that it's the accumulation of material possessions or the attainment of a position of power or prestige or something along those lines, worthy accomplishments, but in my mind, not necessarily indicative of success. So I wanted to come up with a definition of my own, and I started working on this in the mid-30s, and I finally coined my own definition of success. I think it's a result of three things. First of all, my dad. I was raised on a small farm in southern Indiana, three brothers, and Dad, one of the things he tried to get across is never try to be better than someone else. Now, if he stopped there, I don't think it would be very meaningful, but he didn't stop there. He said, learn from others. That's the way we learn from others. And never cease trying to be the best you can be. That's within your power. And how good somebody else is going to be is not within your power. And if you get yourself too engrossed in things over which you have no control, it will adversely affect the things over which you have control. I don't think that registered with me at the time, but later on I thought back, and I know it did. And then I had a high school professor that had the class define success one time, and we used very similar to what Mr. Webster did, and I remember the discussions on that. And then I ran across a very simple verse that said, and I love poetry, my master's thesis on it. The verse said, at God's footstool to confess, a poor soul knelt and bowed his head. I failed, he cried. The master said, thou didst thy best. That is success. So from those three things, I think I came up with my own definition. I defined success in 1934 as peace of mind attained only through self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to do the best of which you're capable. None of us can do all we're capable because that's perfection, and none of us are perfect, but we can all make the effort to do that, and that's exactly what we should. But after a while, it didn't seem to me that this idea was having much of an impact on either myself or those under my supervision. And I tried to analyze the situation to determine why, and eventually I came to the conclusion that it's because this is something abject, a definition. You can't see it. And I think things you see tend to make a better impression, become a little more meaningful than things about which you only hear. So I wanted to come up with something that you could see. And then I recalled something that years before I had seen and had forgotten, but somewhere in the hidden recesses of the mind, I guess it popped out. Someone had taken a ladder with 5 rungs in the ladder and had named each rung of the ladder some particular trait or characteristic that this individual felt was necessary to get to the top of the ladder, where we'd all like to get, even though we might disagree on what we consider the top of the ladder to be. But they gave me an idea, and at that particular time, I started working on something that I chose to call a pyramid to success. I worked on it for the next 14 years and eventually completed it when I was teaching at Indiana State University just prior to going to UCLA. But in the very beginning, I had no idea how many blocks would be in this structure. All I knew was at the apex, at the very top, was going to be success according to my definition. Now, how to get there? This was the point. I placed, at the very beginning, 2 blocks as the cornerstones of this structure without having any idea about how many blocks I'm going to use. I never changed my mind about. I had a lot of ideas. I discarded some. I kept some, but perhaps changed their position within the structure, but never the cornerstones. One cornerstone for success, in my opinion, is industriousness, and the other is enthusiasm. You have a little enthusiasm with this group. I've been with it several times before in different groups, and yes, you have enthusiasm. Industriousness. There is no substitute for work. There is no shortcut. There is no easy way. You may use a trick and get by a while, but you will not be developing the talents that lie within you if that's what you're looking for all the time. Grantland Rice I consider to be the greatest sports writer of all time. He was probably wrote before any of you were born, but I remember him very well. He wrote many things in verse to illustrate points. And he wrote something called How to Be a Champion and said, in part, you wonder how they do it. And you look to see the knack. You watch the foot in action, or the shoulder, or the back. But when you spot the answer where the higher glamours lurk, you'll find in moving higher up the laurel-covered spire that the most of it is practice, and the rest of it is work. I believe that's true. There is no substitute for industriousness. The other cornerstone, remembering that if any structure is to have any strength and solidity, it must have a strong foundation, and these cornerstones anchor the foundation. Enthusiasm. Enthusiasm. You have to enjoy what you're doing. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, you may be talented, and you may be able to do right well in the eyes of others. But if you're not enthusiastic about it, you're not going to be able to affect others. Enthusiasm brushes off upon those with whom you come in contact. Any person dealing with others, and this is a people-oriented world, we're dealing with others all the time in one way or another, and we must be enthusiastic about the things that we're doing if we hope to come close to realizing our own particular level of competency, not better than someone else, but the best of which we're capable. And only we will know that. It's like reputation and character. Your reputation is what others perceive you to be. Your character is what you are. And you're the only one that really knows your character. When I think of enthusiasm, I think of my first year at UCLA. When I attended a meeting one evening, you hear a gentleman speak on a topic which I had no interest at all. And you may say, why did you go? I wouldn't be surprised at the same reason as some of you are here. I don't know. It was my first year at UCLA. I'd already had a good look at the basketball players with whom I was going to be working, and I thought it might be wise for me to try to, set myself in some other areas because it didn't look too promising. So I was there. I sat close to the front. I hoped he wouldn't talk very long. But he changed my mind shortly by his enthusiasm. He wasn't loud, he wasn't bombastic, but you could tell by the sparkle of his eye, by his countenance, he loved his topic, he knew his topic, and I was sorry when he brought his remarks to a close. A few days later, I'd been over to the administration building on the UCLA campus, and with no intention whatsoever of doing so, on my return, I came by our Powell Library, and it seemed like I was drawn in there. I found myself browsing around the stacks, seeking additional information in regard to a topic about which only a few days before I'd had absolutely no interest at all. A topic that has given me a lot of pleasure in all the ensuing years. Enthusiasm brushes off upon those with whom you come in contact. Between the cornerstones, I had 3 blocks. I consider each block to be strong because each block includes others, and we include others, we're adding strength. One is friendship, one is loyalty, and one is cooperation. Friendship, work at it, please. Don't take it for granted. Friendship is like marriage. It's two-sided. It cannot be successful if only one person is working at it. If some person is doing something very nice for you, that's not friendship. That's a nice person. It becomes friendship when you do for each other. And just like marriage, it'll fall unless each side works at it. I was speaking at an IBM convention a number of years ago in San Francisco, and a college classmate of mine came up to me afterwards and he said, Johnny, people in California certainly aren't friendly like they are back home in Indiana, are they? And I said, well, what do you mean, Bob? He said, coming over here this morning, I met a lot of people and not a single person spoke to me. That would never have happened back in Indianapolis. I said, did you speak to any of them? And he said, I didn't know any of them. Well, if we wait for the other person to speak, no one is going to speak. Then loyalty. I don't see how anyone can come close to making the most of their potential unless they have someone to whom they must be loyal and something to which they must be loyal. We need someone and something to which we must be loyal if we expect to come close to realizing anything near our true potential. And then the next block is cooperation. Modern science and technology continues to make this world of ours smaller and smaller. And because of that, it makes cooperation even more essential. With the things that we see done now in outer space and the other things, we see things happening on the other side of the world as they're happening. That wasn't true when I was younger at all, but now we see them, and it's making the world so much smaller. So cooperation we need, and like so many other things, you give it, you'll receive it in return. The next tier, I placed 4 blocks. One is self-control, one is alertness, one is initiative, and one is intentness. You must maintain self-control. Now, I was talking with several people here that played some golf this morning, in spite of the fact that they were up pretty late last night, but they were out playing golf this morning. And whether you're playing golf or whatever you're doing, if you lose your self-control, I know what's going to happen. I know where that golf ball is going to be. Probably going to be there anyway for most of you, but if you lose your self-control, it's going to be a little farther out there, a little farther out here. But more importantly, ladies and gentlemen, it's disciplining those under your supervision, perhaps your children at home. And I firmly and deeply believe that our children cry out for discipline. But let's not forget why we discipline. It's not to punish. It's to help. It's to prevent. It's to correct. It's to improve. If we punish, we antagonize, and it's very difficult to get productive results when you antagonize. So remember why you discipline, and it's so necessary. Discipline is so necessary in any group activity, and somebody has to dispense the discipline. There's someone in the leadership position that'll maybe their obligation, and they have to make decisions that must be made, and it's easy to make suggestions, you know, but it's a little more difficult to make decisions when those decisions are going to affect other people. So we must maintain self-control. The next block is alertness. There's something going on around about us, ladies and gentlemen, all the time from which we can learn. But we have a tendency to get lost in our own narrow tunnel vision, in our own egos, and we don't see it's the many things that are around about us from which we can learn. Abraham Lincoln is my favorite American. He had a wonderful, wonderful ability to say so much in just a few words. And one of the statements he made that I think of when I think of alertness, he said he never met a person from whom he did not learn something. He had a great sense of humor, and he said, of course, most of the time it was something not to do. Well, that's learning just the same. But we've got to be observant and alert and see those things. Mr. Lincoln, you know, he said the best thing a father can do for his children is love their mother. He said the worst thing you can do for those you love are the things they could and should do for themselves. He said most anyone can stand adversity, but to test a person's character, give them power. When he was criticized by, I think, the Secretary of State near the end of the terrible war between the states, he was criticized for what they said he's being too lenient in consideration of various reparations toward the South. And someone said, the Secretary of State, I believe, said, you're supposed to destroy your enemies, not make friends of them. And his reply was, am I not destroying an enemy when I make a friend of them? What a person. The next block is initiative. And you know what that is. You must not be afraid to fail. You have to act, and I know you people do. You have to act. The biggest mistake in the world is failure to act when action is needed. You have to maintain self-control. You have to use the information that you've acquired in the past through past experiences, but act when action is needed, knowing quite well you are imperfect, and occasions you're going to fail. But don't make the same mistake over and over again. So act when action is needed. We must have initiative. Then the fourth block in this second tier is intentness. I might have said determination. I might have said persistence, that one of our presidents says is one of the finest qualities that any person can have. I might have said perseverance. I used intentness. They all mean the same thing. It's being intent on reaching a realistic objective. It's having a goal, but the goal must be realistic. Don't make the goals so idealistic that they're unattainable, or as time goes by, it will become apparent they're unattainable, and when that does become apparent, they'll be counterproductive. Don't make the goal easily achieved, because things easily achieved, acquired, or attained, as a general rule, aren't very worthwhile. They will not be very lasting. Make them difficult, but within the realm of possibility. Know the road toward their achievement will be difficult. There'll be bumps along the way. You may have to go round, under, over. You may have to back up and get another start, but don't quit. Someone said, when I look back, it seems to me all the grief that had to be left me when the pain was o'er, stronger than I was before. We get stronger through adversity. Physical strength through weight programs, adversity. Mental strength through increasingly difficult subject matter in school. We don't start with calculus, we start with arithmetic and work on up. Morally, spiritually, we get stronger through adversity. We should not dread it. It's only going to make us a stronger, better person if we will accept it and learn from it. Just above those 4 blocks, I have 3 blocks. Some have felt that these pertain just to athletics, and nothing could be farther from the truth, although they do pertain to athletics. That's true. One is condition, one is skill, and one is team spirit. You must be conditioned for whatever you do. Salesman, conditioned a certain way. Surgeon, conditioned a certain way. Linebacker, conditioned a certain way. Wide receiver, conditioned a certain way. Whatever you're doing, whatever it is, you have to be conditioned for what you're doing, and that's within your power. And it shouldn't be difficult. It's no sacrifice to do the things that are going to have you in good condition. And I'm not speaking just of physical condition, although physical condition cannot be attained and maintained unless it is preceded by mental and moral conditioning. I used to tell my players that their physical conditioning was dependent on each of us living up to our obligations. I must devise drills that will teach us the fundamentals. I must know where to use these drills in practice. I must know how long to continue them. I must know how to not permit them to become too monotonous. And I must know how to change as the season progresses and as better condition is attained. I have a lot of responsibilities. I must study and analyze you individually. I must have certain drills for you and different ones for you and different ones for you. Some for all, it will be the same. I must do this. It is part of my obligation to you and to our school. But you have an obligation, young men. Your obligation begins when practice ends until you return for the next practice, because you can tear down more than we can build up by lack of moderation in the various things that you do. So condition is so important, whether you're whatever your profession is. You must be conditioned for it. Then we must have the skills, the very heart of the structure. You must be able to not only execute things properly, you must be able to do them quickly. You might be a surgeon in the midst of delicate heart surgery, brain surgery, come up to something unexpected. You may know what to do, but if you can't do it quickly, you might lose the patient. An attorney can lose the case by not being able to respond quickly. And I guarantee you, you can lose your life on these Los Angeles freeways if you can't respond quickly. It's so important that we be... I think sometimes of some of the basketball players I had at UCLA, I had some that were great shooters. Oh, gosh, I could name some, how they could shoot. Oh, they could really shoot. Trouble of it is they weren't quick and couldn't get any shots, and that didn't help us any. But I had some others who could get all sorts of shots, but they couldn't shoot, and that didn't help us either. You have to not only be able to do things properly, but quickly, or you may not get to do them at all. And then the third block is team spirit in the heart of the structure. To me, team spirit is consideration for others. To me, team spirit is losing yourself in the group for the welfare of the group as a whole. It's losing yourself. It's getting rid of the I and thinking of we. That's team spirit. Consideration for others. I think if we had more consideration for others, if heads of state had more considerations for others throughout this troubled world of ours today, our problems would not be as severe. We'd always have problems. We're never going to be without problems, of course, but they wouldn't be as severe. They wouldn't be unmanageable if we just had more consideration for others. It's a sad commentary, ladies and gentlemen, that in the history of our civilization, many wars have been fought, millions of lives have been lost because people in authoritative positions differed with others in regard to race or religion. That's terrible. And you and I today, unless each and every day we do not try to do something to alleviate unjust prejudices, we're a part of the problem. We can't do much as an individual, that is true, but collectively we can do a lot. We are many, but are we much? Not until we collectively make the effort to do more. So I think it's so important. Just above those 3 blocks in the structure, I have 2 blocks. One is poise and one is confidence. I like to make up definitions, as you might have guessed, and I made up a definition for poise, and it's so simple. Poise to me is just being yourself. Don't act, don't pretend, don't try to be something you're not. Be yourself, and you'll function near your level of competency as long as you maintain that. Not worried about what somebody else thinks. What you think of yourself, that's what counts. It's not what others think. It's what you think of yourself. It's like one of the points in the 7-point creed that my dad gave me. Be true to yourself. You're true to yourself, you're going to be true to others as well. Poise, we must have. Confidence. We must believe in ourselves, too. If we expect others to believe in us, we must believe in ourselves. We must have confidence, not overconfidence, not false confidence, not whistling in the dark. No. Can we have poise and confidence that's real, that's not whistling in the dark? I think it's possible. Difficult, of course, because it's worthwhile. And things that are worthwhile should be difficult. Well, then how can you attain poise and confidence that's real? By being industrious, by being enthusiastic, by being friendly, by being loyal, by being cooperative, by maintaining self-control, by being alert and alive and observing constantly, by having initiative and knowing we're imperfect and will fail on occasion, but having the initiative to act when action is needed, by being intent on reaching the realistic objectives, by being conditioned for whatever we're doing, by having the skills and being able to execute not only properly but quickly, and being imbued with consideration for others. Then poise and confidence will be real. It won't be false. And they will lead you up to the last block in the structure, competitive greatness. They will make you competitive. These blocks below, leading up, will make you enjoy it when it's difficult. That will be where you'll have your most fun. There's no real enjoyment in doing what anybody else could do. In spite of the fact in our daily lives, you and I, most of the things that we do, anybody else could do. And whatever it is, simple or difficult, it should be done to the very best of our ability. But you're not going to get the pleasure out of the simple things that you're going to get out of the more difficult things. So these things will make you competitive. Just above the last block in this structure, competitive greatness is the last block in the structure. Along the side, I have different things, sort of like mortar holding the blocks in place. I'm not going to talk about those, just the top 2 from competitive greatness leading up to the apex, on which success rests according to my particular definition. On one side, leading up, is patience, and the other side is faith. Good things take time. We must realize that. We must have patience. As we get older, we tend to be critical of our youth, who tend to be a little more impatient. They want to change things. They forget that although there is no change, no progress without change, all change isn't progress. But as we get older, we too lack patience. We lack patience with our youth at times. We may be satisfied to keep the status quo, or maybe become a little bit afraid of change. We must not. We must have patience. Good things take time and should. And on the other side is faith. We must have faith. We must have faith that things are going to turn out as they should. Things will turn out as they should, providing we do what we should. So many of us at times, we want things to work out the way we want them to, but we don't want to do the things that are necessary to make things work out that way. We just want it to happen. And that isn't life. That isn't the way it should be. But sometimes we get involved that way. So those are the blocks leading up to the apex that I believe will help one attain success according to my particular definition of success. There was a Major League Baseball umpire by the name of George Moriarty. George Moriarty spelt Moriarty, believe it or not, with only one I. And in some respects, that was a mistake, because the Major League Baseball players, when they found out that he had only one I in his name, they often remarked that that was one more than he had in his head. But he wrote something that I think tried to show in a way what I tried to show in this pyramid. He called it the road ahead or the road behind. And he said, sometimes I think the fates must grin as we denounce them and insist the only reason we can't win is the fates themselves have missed. Yet there lives on the ancient claim, we win or lose within ourselves. The shining trophies on our shelves can never win tomorrow's game. You and I know deeper down, there's always a chance to win the crown, but when we fail to give our best, we simply haven't met the test of giving all and saving none until the game is really won, of showing what is meant by grit, of fighting on when others quit, of playing through, not letting up. It's bearing down that wins the cup. Yet losing, not afraid to fall, if gamely we have given all. For who can ask more of a man than giving all within his span? Giving all, it seems to me, is not so far from victory. And so the fates are seldom wrong. No matter how they twist and wind, it's you and I who make our fates. We open up or close the gates on the road ahead or the road behind, and we do. If we start looking for reasons, making excuses and whatnot, we're not doing what we should do. One of the set of three that my dad gave me and my brothers was never whine, never complain, and don't make excuses. Not bad, really. I didn't realize at the time, as the years went by, I understood a little more what he was talking about. I'll close my remarks with you with an excerpt from another poem that has been meaningful to me. I hope you understand my reasoning of it. It's the ending of a poem called God's Hall of Fame. It closes in this manner. This crowd on earth, they soon forget the heroes of the past. They cheer like mad until you fall, and that's how long you last. So true. But God, he never does forget. And in his Hall of Fame, if just believing in his Son, inscribed, you'll find your name. I tell you, friends, I would not trade my name, however small, inscribed up there beyond the stars in that celestial hall, for any famous name on earth or glory that they share. I'd rather be an unknown here and have my name up there. It's been a long day for you. I thank you. I thank you. I thank you for your attention. And I hope and pray that 1998 will be the greatest year ever, but it will be followed by many, many more even better. Thank you for your attention.